Good afternoon, Warren Township Schools. Dr. Mingle, Superintendent here with our week ending April 17th update on the COVID-19 school closure. As we've done each week of the closure, I'll give a brief update on where we are, key new information, and where we're headed to next. Most importantly, if you haven't already seen it, Governor Murphy has announced that school closures will continue through at least May 15th. So part of what I'll talk about today is how we plan for the next month. That does not necessarily mean we come back after May 15th, but it means that a decision about the end of the school year is forthcoming and not yet in place. So let's just kind of reorient ourselves. Before spring break, we spent 3 weeks in generally a review kind of a situation with content and delivery. Spring break took place last week, and we came back this week in week 4 with the launch of asynchronous video and new learning content. I'll talk about those things a little bit more in a few minutes. We are also this week following up with parents who have not fulfilled the requirements as far as giving their children permission to use certain tools. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes as well. And where we're headed to briefly, which we'll go into much more detail later in the video, is the more widely available use of asynchronous video, new learning content being fully operational, and the implementation and introduction of synchronous video as well. One of the things that our staff worked on this week through the direction of our curriculum department are flexible instruction day guidelines for introducing new learning. One of the areas of focus as an opportunity that we're looking at during this time is increasing consistency across the district and making sure that we realize that teaching and learning in an online space is not the same as teaching and learning in a physical space. And although we are all living it day to day right now, and we all have opinions about what we think will work and what we think will not work, there are differences, and we need to take the time to make sure that our staff and our students are trained in what those look like. So just to summarize a couple key points on here, I'm not going to go through each bullet point of this document, which was really meant for internal training purposes. But we want to make sure that we're flexible with access and timing. This is one of the reasons why asynchronous is our focus rather than synchronous for the most part. We want to make sure our students are engaged in meaningful work. And as a reminder, we did give directive before spring break for review of existing material, and that shift to new learning is taking place now. We want to connect students to things that interest them and their identities. Where it's appropriate, and especially with our younger children, we want to make sure that families are partners in that process, not feeling the significant burden that we know this is, especially for families where there's a balancing act taking place, and especially with young kids, but making sure family members feel like they're a part of the process. Realizing that not all of our students have the same access to things like a quiet environment to do work, support at the same level from adults, or maybe even materials that we might take for granted in the school setting. We want students to have choice where appropriate. We want self-reflection from our kids. We want sensitivity in the design. So what might work for one child may not work for another child. How do we take into consideration the needs of our English language learners, of whom number in the 50 to 60 range in the district? What about our classified students, students who receive ASAP support and other kinds of services? And we want to make sure that we're constantly encouraging, supporting, facilitating the sharing of best practices and ideas within and across the schools. One of the other things that we've come across, and maybe some have seen this from the parental side as well, is that what it takes for a student to access his or her learning online is significantly different than what it takes for a student to access his or her learning in a classroom space. In classrooms, our teachers are experts at the pedagogy of what it takes to engage students over the course of a school day in the way that we organize it. Online is very different. And this guide, which comes to us from the Illinois State Board of Education, suggests minimum and maximum amounts of sustained commitment to schoolwork in a digital landscape. Now, obviously, some of the assignments that are happening do not require a student to be on technology, but most of what we're doing does. And so you see there in our younger grades, it could be as little as 60 minutes to a maximum of about 2 hours by the end of the elementary school years and up to about 3 hours at the middle school years. Even maybe more importantly than that is the recommended length of sustained attention. The expert guidance, which is where Illinois relied on this information, tells us that for most kids, more than 10 or 15 minutes of one time sustained attention to a digital platform is probably about the limit. And that speaks to our use down the road of synchronous video and synchronous instruction being in small bits as opposed to in the traditional model of, say, a 50-minute class period. We also have continued our check-ins on how people are doing. I changed the way the data is presented in this slide for our student check-in because I wanted to highlight the significant decline in participation over each week. We're down to about a 7% participation rate for our students. I just want to encourage, if you're watching this video, take the time to go into the weekly briefing and complete, on behalf of your child, the check-in on how he or she was feeling during this week, because that information is extremely valuable to how we prioritize our resources for the coming week. I'm happy that the vast majority of our students are feeling fine, but obviously we want to make sure we're hearing from the largest number possible, because the data is only as good as the inputs that we receive. One of the things that we've been collecting but I haven't reported on previously are the areas that our parents are telling us are successful. So in the survey just before spring break, where we had 98 parent responses, 68 at the elementary level and 30 at the middle school level, you can see that our elementary parents felt that teacher communication and videos were one of our areas of strength. That was week one of really implementing the videos at that level, and that having a routine that is consistent has been very helpful. At the middle school level, our parents are reporting that they're impressed, in some cases very surprised, that their kids are able to manage themselves adequately well. They've adapted to the new environment, they're completing their work independently, and they're managing their schedule as well. On the concern side at the elementary level, it's been very consistent from week to week. So the number one concern at the elementary level is around parents balancing the needs of their school-age children and the needs of other responsibilities, whether that are younger children, work responsibilities, and so on. We recognize that and shared some resources throughout the week. And at the end of this video, I'll talk about some things moving forward that I think might be able to help with that as well. Maintaining engagement and focus. I mentioned earlier that time limit to what a student can really be expected to do. I think that might be new information for a lot of parents who may not see the way in schools we constantly work to engage and refocus kids. It's okay if a student is struggling after 10 or 15 minutes to stay engaged with their task. That might be a good opportunity to take a quick break. We call them brain breaks in a lot of our classrooms. It might be an opportunity to go outside. That's all okay. We want to be flexible with our expectations. We have a 4-hour window that we're recommending for the time that students complete the work, but it is purposeful that they do not have 4 full hours of work to complete in that time frame. And then obviously the lack of interaction with teachers, which I think the next phase of our flexible instruction will address as well. At the middle school level, very consistent from week to week as well. The interaction piece with peers and teachers, of course, which we'll be addressing. And then the third item there, each one had 2 comments that got there. So engagement, kids staying engaged. There was a concern that some teachers were posting assignments later in the day, which has been addressed, and then communications. One thing I should say here as a general rule of thumb is that all the regular protocols that we follow in the school year when we're in person apply here. So if as a parent you're having a difficulty with your child or with their experience in a particular class, you should definitely feel that it's appropriate to reach out to the teacher. Their response time may be delayed. You can't expect it to be within 5 minutes. Our teachers are getting many, many more emails on a daily basis because of the nature of the way the work is going. But that's the place to go to say, listen, your instructions said this should take about 90 minutes and my child took 20, or they took 7 hours. That kind of information is really important to be communicated between parent and teacher. And then we go through the process of going to a principal or district official if that's necessary. When we ask our staff how we're feeling, we've seen, with the exception of right before spring break, when we significantly upped the expectations as far as daily work, generally speaking, our staff is hovering around the high 60 to 70% feeling fine, smaller percentage feeling stressed, and then we have individuals pop up where they need support additionally. One of the things I'm really proud of is the work our staff has been doing over the course of the time we've been out to go from never being trained in the use of things like asynchronous video to being trained and then getting more comfortable with it. So on those Wednesday professional development days, we've gone from an average of 3.1 to 3.9 over the course of just 2 weeks, which is a significant 25% increase in comfort level. We have not done this training yet district-wide on synchronous video. We're only piloting it in some small places. And so even without that training, our staff members' comfort level is going up. And once we do that training next week, I imagine we'll see a significant jump there as well. I did want to highlight, because I know this is an important area for some in the community, the differences between how we look at the use of video, asynchronous and synchronous in this survey, that we can see the difference in both cases. So the blue representing asynchronous video, the red representing synchronous video. Our staff feels more strongly about asynchronous, as do our parents, but the ratio is different. So our staff is hovering around the 3s, 2.5 to 3. Our parents are hovering around the 4s to 4.5. I do want to point out that in the synchronous video concerns that our parents have shared, while there are many who support the idea of using synchronous video, there are also significant concerns in some homes with either technology access or privacy concerns and so on. So I will talk about how we will implement the use of synchronous video in certain ways in just a few minutes. And so where are we going? This slide hasn't changed since previous, but we are further along the continuum now, remembering that when we started 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, if you include spring break, we were issuing assignments in text format. We then moved to some asynchronous video with short videos, and now mini lessons with instructional objectives where kids are engaging that way. We have already launched some pilots with the use of video office hours or small group instruction opportunities. That's already happening in some places. But I want to point out that this requires active consent from parents. And as of a couple of hours ago, we were at about a 70% return rate for the release, which we sent out and made available through our Genesis parent portal almost 2 full weeks ago at this point. So we are sending reminders to families, but until we have close to 100% participation, it's very difficult for teachers to go into that direction because they don't know which kids can and cannot participate in those opportunities. So if you got that reminder, or if you don't know what I'm referring to, if you sign into your child's Genesis parent portal, there's information in the daily community briefings yesterday and today. Please make sure you go back and check that out if you haven't already. And so how do we get to that next stage, which is really the 4.0 level of the distance learning continuum? Well, next week, we'll continue implementation of asynchronous video usage and new content delivery on Monday and Tuesday. Our teachers did a great deal of work this week to be ready for all of that and consistently approaching grading and that sort of thing. On Wednesday of this coming week, which is Earth Day, our students will be engaged in Earth Day field trips while our staff is trained in the use of synchronous video for synchronous office hours and check-in meetings with students. We will expand the implementation of that later in the week next week and move further into it again the week after that, the week of April 27th. We have another virtual field trip on the Wednesday of that week, and then we're pretty much into our full implementation of the tools. May 4th through 8th is listed there as TBD because we have a really exciting opportunity that our elementary phys ed teachers, our elementary and middle school phys ed teachers are working on related to field day. And so once we finalize the plan around a virtual field day for the whole district, that may lead to some changes of which things happen on which day on the week of May 4th. So more to come on that exciting information. And then I also want to highlight that the day-to-day operations, which I'm confident we're making improvements on each week in a very methodical way, as I've talked about before, are really just one small aspect of what's happening in the larger school district right now. So we now have developed working groups at the administrative level, and we've engaged staff in other places to think about much grander. What does this look like if we stay out all the way through June? What does it look like if the social distancing requirements continue through the summer? And how does that affect us reopening even in September? So one of the things you'll see next week is a launch of expanded after-school activities. Some after-school activities have been continuing at both the elementary and middle school levels while we are away, and others are not. We are going to reallocate the money available for the stipends so that we can start offering virtual after-school activities and in greater number. One of the things that we are working through right now, and I am proposing, is some kind of elementary super club which would allow students from across the 4 elementary schools to work together in after school activities with staff members who maybe have more availability in their schedules than others because perhaps they're not taking care of young children at home. So something exciting, I hope, that will come next week and the week after as far as enrichment opportunities, which then can lengthen the amount of time in the day for families that are looking for their kids to be more engaged beyond the 9 to 1 time frame. We have working groups looking at things like how do we handle kindergarten, fifth, and eighth grade graduation and moving up ceremonies. I met with the PTO presidents and others this week about the fifth grade event. We have to make decisions about the seventh and eighth grade overnight field trips, which are scheduled for late May. We have all kinds of end of year art and music and other sort of celebratory events, as well as our fifth grade and eighth grade capstone projects. One of the challenges of not having schools closed for the end of the year right now is that we know where we're going to be between now and May 15th, but we don't exactly know where we're going to be between May 15th and June 15th. And so we will start to make some decisions and then we'll adjust as things arise. But those are on our radar. We are thinking about those topics. And I would encourage you, if there are other topics in that group that you think we might be missing, to include that in the survey that you fill out today in your other information for the administration. I also had an initial meeting yesterday with our summer fund administrators, and we are working on an alternate proposal that would allow for a menu of activities to be available virtually in summer fun. More to come on that, as well as our extended school year program for students who qualify for it. And even greater than all of those things is that no matter when we reopen, we know there will be challenges. There will be academic concerns, but there are also significant social emotional concerns. We have families who have been displaced during this time. We have students who might be living in other communities temporarily or are living in Warren but have family members from other communities with them temporarily. We have logistical questions about what kinds of rules and guidelines will be in place. We are starting to work on various contingency plans for all different kinds of future scenarios that we don't exactly know how to predict just yet. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone once again for the flexibility and understanding as we work through what is a situation that none of us were ever prepared for. As I said at the very beginning, on the first phone call home when we announced the school closure, we're going to work extremely hard every day to make sure that we do right by our kids to the greatest extent possible. We will get a lot of things right, and we will get things wrong as well. And the best way for you to share that information with us about how you think we're doing and ideas maybe that you're learning from other school districts or things you read online or elsewhere is to fill out the weekly survey each Friday. We take those results very seriously and we make sure we use those to identify our priorities for the next week. Thank you for watching and for your continued attention. Look forward to another wonderful week of learning next week and see you in a week. Thank you and have a great weekend.